Chinese and Russian warships have teamed up to encircle Japan. Here's what you need to know. A joint naval exercise between China and Russia has completed a near full circle of Japan, reinforcing tensions in the region, according to CNN. The Chinese warships included a Type 55 destroyer, a Type 55D destroyer, and two Type 54A frigates, while the Russian ships included two Udaloy-class destroyers, two Steregushchiy-class corvettes, and a Marshal Nedelin-class ship, according to The Drive. The exercises have brought the charge of hypocrisy because China regularly condemns similar exercises by the U.S. in the Taiwan Strait as destabilizing. 2 weeks ago, for instance, the Chinese military's Eastern Theater Command suggested a U.S. and Canadian transit could seriously jeopardize peace and stability in the strait, according to CNN. Both those ships and now the Chinese and Russian vessels remained in international waters, but notably the Chinese and Russian ships took a route through the Tsugaru Strait, which is only around 12 miles wide at its narrowest point. That places them well within the area that can be claimed by a country under international law, albeit Japan only actually claims areas 3 miles from either shore. The move also represents the first time Chinese and Russian naval ships have sailed the Tsugaru Strait together, according to Japan's Deputy Chief Cabinet Secretary cited by Yahoo, and thus can be seen as a further escalation of tensions in a region where military activity has been growing steadily in recent months. In addition to the aforementioned U.S. passage through the Taiwan Strait earlier this month, a large international fleet made up of aircraft carriers from the U.S. and UK, a helicopter carrier from Japan, and smaller ships from the Netherlands, Canada, and New Zealand conducted exercises together off the southwest coast of the Japanese prefecture of Okinawa. Shortly after that, the United Kingdom carrier Strike Group 21 passed through the Luzon Strait on its way to Singapore, and the New Zealand Navy's HMNZS Takaha traveled alongside it in the South China Sea, while separately the UK's HMS Richmond made a rare voyage by a non-US ship through the Taiwan Strait, according to France 24. Those exercises came in the wake of China sending around 150 aircraft into Taiwan's air defense zone over a 4-day period beginning on October 1st, according to Reuters, and is widely suggested that the American-led movements in the area can be seen as an effort to contain China. However, there is also major technological buildup going on in the background to all of this. The US-based Center for Strategic and International Studies, for instance, recently released new satellite photos showing that China's new aircraft carrier is nearing completion. Images of the carrier in Shanghai's Jiangnan shipyard reveal that the new carrier has slots for 3 separate plane-launching catapult systems, making it much more effective than China's existing 2 carriers, which use simple deck ramps to launch their aircraft. These older carriers can only launch fighter-type jets with light bomb loads, while the new carrier should be able to launch and catch heavier fixed-wing planes like the US's vital E-2 Hawkeye radar platform. But China is not the only country enhancing its military capacity, with even the militarily cautious Japan revealing last year that it was developing an indigenous next-generation fighter jet to counter China's J-20. The new fighter will replace the Mitsubishi F-2, which is due to be retired in the mid-2030s. Defense News reported the unnamed fighter, dubbed the F-3, will be optimized for air dominance, stealthy, and interoperable with the U.S. military. The F-3 would carry more missiles than a U.S. F-35, and in addition, a report in Forbes stated the F-3 is also likely to carry cruise missiles, such as the ASM-3 anti-ship missile and the Sea and Land Target Joint Strike Missile. With provocative defense pacts being signed in the background to all of this military growth, it's hard to see how things get any less tense in the near future. America is handing out nuclear submarines to an ally. Here's what you need to know. The UK, US, and Australia have announced a security pact aimed at confronting China, whereby Australia will be provided with the technology to build nuclear-powered submarines for the first time, according to the BBC. Australia says it will abide by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in not pursuing nuclear weapons, but the move could still indirectly spur the proliferation of nuclear weapons because of the technology it involves and the precedents it sets, according to The Guardian. The risk has been taken to allow Australia's currently diesel-powered navy to match China's technology, with the practical advantages of nuclear submarines being that they can move at faster speeds for longer and more stealthily than conventional ones, according to CNN, which adds that these submarines need to surface less often. But there is also a clear symbolic element to the technology transfer, with one U.S. official explaining to CNN that allowing Australia to be only the 6th country in the world to own nuclear submarines is frankly an exception to our policy in many respects. The pact, known as AUKUS, which also covers artificial intelligence, quantum technologies, and cyber warfare, is designed as a response to China's military buildup in the Indo-Pacific, according to the BBC. The Guardian and the Financial Times offer two contrasting schools of thought on the wider implications of the arrangement. Quoted in the Financial Times, the head of foreign and defense policy at the American Enterprise Institute said Wednesday's deal was an elegant message, a reminder to China that Australia has the technological capabilities and alliance relationships that they could become a nuclear power if the threat China poses becomes so severe. Quite what the world has come to when gifting someone nuclear-powered submarines is considered an elegant act of subtle genius is likely beyond the remit of this video. However, the same head of foreign and defense policy did also add that this is a good moment for the Biden administration to demonstrate its commitment to the security of its allies after the debacle of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. And that's perhaps something almost everyone can agree on. Handing over weapons to Australia is at least a moderate improvement on handing over weapons to the Taliban. Dialing down the fawning sycophancy, though, The Guardian notes that critics of the agreement warn that it sets a dangerous precedent for countries to exploit a loophole in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. That treaty doesn't rule out non-nuclear weapon countries building nuclear-powered submarines or removing the fissile material they need for the reactors from the stockpile monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency. But that does open up the possibility that the material could be diverted towards making weapons, and The Guardian explains that Australia would be the first country to make use of that loophole. James Acton, co-chair of the Nuclear Policy Program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, said, "My concern is not that Australia would misuse the nuclear material we give them and use the loophole to build nuclear weapons. My concern is it sets a terrible precedent that other countries could abuse. Iran is the obvious example here. We would go batshit if Iran removed nuclear material from safeguards." David Cullen of the Nuclear Information Service made a similar point. This has only happened once before in history, when the US helped the UK develop its first nuclear-powered submarines. The question will be how will the Australians be supplied and whether they want to develop their own nuclear capability to enrich uranium fuel, Cullen added. Whatever your view on if it's right or wrong, it's clear why it's happening. CNN characterizes the development as the latest step by the US to push back against China's military and technological rise, and notes that next week President Biden will also host a summit of the Quad partnership of Japan, Australia, India, and the US. The Quad is another grouping viewed as part of a growing attempt to push American influence in Asia. After its inception in response to the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami, China's concerns about the group's influence led to members hitting the brakes on the partnership, according to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. But approaches now appear to be shifting, and the group held its first military exercises together last year and the first leadership meeting in March. In the foreground of the current bad atmosphere between the US and China is a dispute over the US conducting naval exercises in the South China Sea last week. A US Navy aircraft carrier strike group and a destroyer operated in the South China Sea last Wednesday, days after China introduced a law requiring foreign vessels to give notice before entering waters it claims as its own. Guided missile destroyer USS Benfold traveled within 12 nautical miles of Mischief Reef in the Spratly Islands, according to a US Navy press release Wednesday, and the USS Carl Vinson, along with its strike group, also trained in the same region. Responding to that development, the editor-in-chief of Chinese state media mouthpiece, The Global Times, has now tweeted, "Hopefully when Chinese warships pass through the Caribbean Sea or show up near Hawaii and Guam one day, the US will uphold the same standard of freedom of navigation." He added that day will come soon. So the back and forth of military escalation looks set to continue, and it's worth reminding ourselves of why, in general, that's a bad idea for the world. In 2018, a very expensive submarine in India was put out of commission for at least 10 months because someone in the Navy forgot basic training. The INS Arahant is the country's first nuclear-powered submarine. It's equipped with torpedoes and ballistic missiles and cost a whopping $2.9 billion US. Some genius left an external hatch open while the sub was at harbor, inevitably causing seawater to pour in once it dove underwater. The vessel's entire propulsion chamber got flooded as a result of human error, which led to severe damage. Water had to be pumped out of the submarine and the pipes replaced since they were exposed to corrosive seawater. This is just a reminder that, however careful and good at building insane technology we are still human, and human error is going to remain a factor in whatever environment we exist in. Tensions are rising in the waters around China, with a huge international fleet conducting drills in the Western Pacific and the South China Sea. Here's what you need to know. 3 aircraft carriers from the US and UK combined with a helicopter carrier from Japan to conduct exercises north of Taiwan in the same weekend that China made a record number of incursions into Taiwan's air defense zone. Citing the Japanese Defense Ministry, USNI reports that the carriers operating off the southwest coast of the Japanese prefecture of Okinawa were supported by ships from the Netherlands, Canada, and New Zealand in a fleet totaling 17 that was also pictured with British and American fighter jets overhead. The exercises were characterized by Japan's nationalist paper Sankei Shimbun as an effort to contain China, and that rhetoric may be in response to China's increasingly threatening incursions into Taiwan's air defense zone, with 93 such incidents occurring between Friday and Saturday, plus an additional 56 on Monday, which took the single-day record for most incursions, according to Reuters. The U.S. State Department's position over the weekend was that it was very concerned by China's provocative military activity near Taiwan, which is destabilizing, risks miscalculations, and undermines regional peace and stability, according to the BBC, and significant military activity in the area is ongoing. The United Kingdom carrier Strike Group 21, led by the HMS Queen Elizabeth, announced on Twitter on Monday that it had passed through the Taiwan Strait on its way to Singapore, and the New Zealand Navy added that its own HMNZS Te Kaha would be transiting alongside it in the South China Sea. Elsewhere, just over a week ago, the UK's HMS Richmond made a rare voyage by a non-US ship through the Taiwan Strait, according to France 24. The military response from China came through its Eastern Theater Command, which said it sent air and naval forces to shadow the HMS Richmond and directed to leave the strait, according to CBS News. Taiwan News reports that the HMS Richmond went on to take part in exercises with the Vietnamese Navy frigate Dinh Tien Hong on Monday before heading to Singapore, the first ever at-sea naval activity between the two navies, according to USNI News. Of course, these are only the latest developments within the dynamic of increasing tensions between China and much of the rest of the world. The US's new pact with Australia and the UK represents a major expression and cause of tension. So does the increasing activity of the Quad, an informal strategic forum between the US, Japan, Australia, and India that is solidifying into a further anti-Chinese bloc. And so does a 2020 bilateral defense pact between Japan and Australia. But there are also many less prominent signs of escalation and tension around China, both geographically and politically. For instance, although not involved this time, in March the French Defense Ministry announced that a nuclear attack submarine had conducted a patrol in the South China Sea, along with a support ship to underscore freedom of navigation. In addition to this, France sent an amphibious assault helicopter carrier and the frigate on a long-term deployment involving passing through the South China Sea twice. On top of China's attempts to take control of Taiwan against the will of the Taiwanese people, the South China Sea is a source of tension because it is the center of numerous economic, island, and maritime disputes between China, Taiwan, Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei, and the Philippines. The French military tweeted that the ships passed through the Suez Canal on February 25th and conducted exercises with the Egyptian Navy on March 3rd and March 4th.
For more news animations and explainers, hit the subscribe and bell button to join the TomoNews family. Thanks for watching.